Greetings and welcome to the Elephant TV. My name is Joe Kobuthi. Today I'll be speaking to Dr. Alex Awiti. Dr. Awiti is a Vice Provost at the Aga Khan University, and previously he was a director of the East African Institute at the same institution. Karibu, Dr. Awiti, to the Elephant.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Dr. Awiti, in 2015, led by you, the East African Institute, which is Auspice and Aga Khan, did a very interesting research. And one of the findings of the research said that almost 50–60% of youth in Kenya, majority rather, don't care how they make money. So in a sense, they endorse corruption. Same report also said that this same cluster of individuals, in terms of their political and social, how they identify themselves, identify themselves highest through religious affiliations than any other group, ethnic or otherwise. But 2022, as we move up to the elections, in a sense, this same cluster, because it's the youth which makes a big part of the country, according to recent polls, we're 3–4 months to the elections, and 35% of this cluster are apathetic towards elections, and many won't vote or undecided. What do you make of it? What do you make of this youth trajectory from 2015, studying youth behaviors and attitudes, to now 2022, moving towards the elections, and majority rather, 35% going up to 40%, either won't vote or undecided and are completely apathetic towards Kenya's elections?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think it's very consistent to the survey that we conducted, and at that time, 40% of young people say they would vote only for the person who paid them to vote. Mm-hmm. So that right there is a very clear personal incentive and personal stake in the process that is outside the larger conversations of policy, manifestos, party political platforms, national aspiration, national development goals, and the central reason for democracy. And I think what this speaks to is the fact that young people are not engaged. The political actors, in all of their guises, have not been able to create a value proposition compelling enough for young people to feel part of the process. Right. None of the political players, from the marginal candidates like Musalia Mudavadi, Kalonzo, to the dominant players here, William Ruto and Raila Odinga, are charismatic or even inspiring to create a movement, to create an excitement around what are critical national issues. What is their rallying call? What is their rallying point? What is it that Ruto says that young people get up and say, I want to be part of this? What is it that Raila says that causes young people to say, I want to join the movement? I want to make a difference. I want to change my country. So they have failed to frame the political stakes that speak directly to young people. And therefore, in the absence of being paid to do something, make this vote a very transactional operation, they don't see any reason, because they don't see anybody articulating a plan to alleviate the crushing rates of unemployment. They don't see anybody speak to the spiraling cost of living. They don't see anybody speak to issues which they think are critical to their parents,
right?
Like a decent retirement, access to health, access to land, to credit, to all of these things. So when they think about this country and they think about their own personal condition, they feel there's nothing in there.
Hmm. But Alex, I mean, one could argue, I mean, looking at previous elections, particularly for a kind of political class that we have here in Kenya, is that thus far they have managed to sustain the state through, particularly through sloganeering. You know, I mean, whether it's borrowed or they believe in it through sloganeering. You know, we were happy removing Moi, but when we removed Moi, we also so we realized that there are many within the Kibaki regime who articulated that, you know, removing Moi, democracy and the rule of law and decision making was just to remove Moi. Now, once they got in, you know, things needed to continue as they were. We've seen the same thing in the Jubilee administration, where in 2017 in particular, with some of the sloganeering and mobilizing ethnic groups. So to the extent that until 2017, you know, sloganeering and, you know, and identity politics was such core to our politics. Are you suggesting that the 35% and also the youth, there's an evolution towards how we begin to perceive our politics, and that Kenyans are demanding more of policy reform rather than just political sloganeering?
Yeah, I think the country has matured in many respects, and the young people are now more clear-eyed than in the previous times when you could use ethnic mobilizing to get young people excited and to get the country animated about the politics.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, all of these players cannot make any claim to moving the country forward, instituting clean government, you know, for instance, corruption-free government. And David D, who is a friend to the elephant, has been very clear and said, if you're looking for someone who will clean government and rid the country of corruption, don't look at us. We're not running on an anti-corruption platform. We're running on a platform to fix the economy and this whole construct around bottom up. So they've made that very clear. Now, if you look at today, this transition from Uhuru ending his term, and it's very similar to what happened between Kibaki and, it's not similar to what happened between Kibaki and Moi. Kibaki ran on a very, very clear platform of ending the autocratic Moi regime, reinstating fiscal discipline, and ending wanton corruption. So the issues were very, very clear, and the country responded. You know, the victory that Kibaki rode to State House, I don't think there's any politician in my lifetime who will achieve that. That's 63, 36 or 30%. Nobody can ever get there. The country is now, you know, the devil with apathy, and the fact that these two politicians have just not, I don't see the difference between Ruto and Raila. You know, Raila was a player in Kibaki's government, and so was William Ruto. William Ruto has been in Uhuru's government that has its own fair burden of blame to shoulder. And Ruto has not been able to articulate what it is that he's going to do. Raila has not said how his government is going to be different. So right now, people are just looking at these two individuals, and maybe you spit on your thumb, push it out and see where the wind is going to blow the spittle. There is nothing that separates these two candidates in terms of the government programs, policy programs that they're going to pursue. So that's why young people are now very clear that there is nothing in it for them. They're seeing that. And that's why it's also difficult to mobilize ethnically. You know, what are you going to mobilize ethnically about this time? How do you polarize the country? You know, what basis are you going to use? And even in 2013, it was difficult to polarize the country ethnically. In 2017, it was also difficult to polarize the country ethnically. because the political classes gelled together, and we now can now construct us versus them very easily. People see that the majority of Kenyans live a very different life from the business and political elite of this country.
Right.
Now, that is becoming increasingly clear, and even this hustler nation, the devotees of that slogan are not convincing. They're not authentic. They're not hustlers by any stretch of imagination. These are college-educated people with PhDs advancing this hustler Kool-Aid, and then it just doesn't fly.
So, and how? Well, then, I mean, you're right. But how do we make sense of the exhaustion that not just what you'll see with the middle classes who are put out, but even with the informal masses, that usually make up a lot of, that give life to our electoral processes. For example, outside of the rallies, and as we know, many of the rallies, mobilization is because the youth are given money and they attend the rallies. But if you look at just they just finished nomination processes, just the level of voter turnout in Central, I think it was less than 2%. In parts of Nyanza, in Rift Valley, when it was low, but then there was also a lot of contestation, even internally, towards what you in the past would say these are strongholds, or strongholds of these ethnic kingpins. How do you make of these developments?
You see, this is the big what do I say? It is the big contradiction in everything that we've been seeing with the mobilization around political rallies. Because what we would have hoped for to see was a galvanized nomination process that really captivates the imagination of Kenyans, basically saying that we need to elect our own leaders within those party structures. Now, what we've been sold is a bill of goods. ODM is not what it claims to be. UDA is not this behemoth of a movement that its promoters have been suggesting. Now, it's where the rubber hits the road, citizens basically prioritize their personal endeavors to eke out a living every day, and did not see it necessary to go and waste time on those winding queues to vote, because they just don't think it is important for them. They don't see any of those candidates, each one of them talking about what they wanted to do, but they didn't see themselves in there. They could see a clash of personalities. They could see the party gimmicks in terms of how they're going to rig the process. And that's why it was unbelievable, some of the events that we saw, certificates being swapped around. This guy has it, then it's taken away from you and given to somebody else.
Right.
We saw, I guess, apart from Kericho, there was nothing else that was exciting about this poll. Keter not becoming the governor, losing to Eric Mutai. I think that was one of those kind of seismic moments in this, but that's all it was. In some parts of the country, like in Kisumu County, you look at those turnouts against the registered voter numbers, you have a senator elected with less than 40,000 votes. And you have a governor who gets a direct ticket. So you can see the reasons for the apathy, because they somehow believe that, okay, they've decided who's going to be something. Why should I bother showing up? Because this is a club, this is for only card holding members of the club. So somehow ODM will still end up with the list of all the contestants for all the elective posts. So again, what it also speaks to is that the whole party structure as a basis for democratic organizing in this country is very weak.
Right.
So party politics does not exist. And that's why you'll see in this election, perhaps we might have the largest haul of elected independents. Because as you say, citizens might then say, look, you know what, I'm checking out of this, but I'm not checking out of putting my vote to elect the MCA that I want, who will work for me. Yes, the party is telling me to do this, but you can see these rumblings of rebellion across the parties, from UDA to Jubilee to Wiper to ODM. The country is in revolt. And I think they're saying this is the last bastion that we want to protect.
Right.
And if the citizens can then own the counties and basically say, it doesn't matter how you organize national politics, but leave us alone to elect our own governors, to elect our own senators, to elect. Actually, they don't even care much about senators. They care about MCAs.
The governors.
They care about their governors. These two positions are turning out of the most critical in this process. Citizens are basically saying, no, you can't shove us on these ones. MPs, they sit in Nairobi, we don't know what they do. Half the time, they're irrelevant. But my county assembly representative and my governor, this is the last stronghold.
Right. Alex, one Professor Bethel Ogot in 2004, said that Project Kenya is dead. So I'm wondering, particularly, he said that, and then 2007 happened, and then there was a reorganization of our state with 2010 constitution, and in August 2010 there was a breath of fresh air within the country. We felt like we are moving forward finally again, but it seems 12 years later, it seems we are back at that point where, if the polls and just the anecdotes coming out of different spaces that we believed, it's almost as if Kenyans have lost hope in this thing called Project Kenya. What do you make of this?
I think Ogot was far-sighted in this, and it is just depressing that he was so accurate. But after the 2002 elections, with the ascent of Kibaki to the State House, I think there was a national moment right there. There was an opportunity there to build. Kibaki had a chance to build what no other president could have built except him and Jomo Kenyatta in the first 2 years of his leadership, 64 to 66, before KPU split and Kenyatta went separate ways with Odinga. The whole movement towards multi-party, towards independence, was basically forged through national unity, where leaders were able to sit down, and that's why we had Uhuru Kenyatta and people like Ngei, Gishuru were not interested in all the gimmicks and the games that the colonists were playing. They were all united behind one leader, who was Jomo Kenyatta. In 2002, we saw that everybody was united behind Kibaki. Then 2005 happened, and then 2007 happened, and then 2008 happened with the National Accord. And Kibaki and Raila had a chance to stitch the country together, but they refused to have the hard conversations around what contestations are and what makes our political competition, especially around the presidency, extremely ethnically polarizing. Everybody refused to walk through that door that was so wide open to basically address the present and urgent conversation about national unity. We had failed attempts about Kenya we want. We had all kinds of conversations about that. You could see in BBI, they tried to bring some of those and try and figure out how we could weave a national narrative around being Kenyan and reinstate and breathe fresh air into the lungs of Project Kenya. So I think there's been a lot of missed opportunities.
Right.
The presidential election is still as polarizing. The attempts that you could see in the BBI to try and diffuse the intense, vitriolic, ethnically divisive competition around the presidency, and say, if we had different centers of power, and it was not a winner take it all, we could somehow diminish that. But then you have the rare part of that, people were as conservative as Ruto, for instance. And Ruto has been very, very consistent, because this is exactly the Moi attitude around devolution, for instance, where we basically said, how can we diminish the primacy of the presidency as the object of hostile, divisive political competition? Ruto basically says, no, it's a winner take it all, and all you need is a strong president. A benign president who basically thinks about everybody else. But we've seen consistently that Ruto is not going to be the exception to the rule. This is exactly what Kenyatta did. This is what Kibaki did. This is what Uhuru has done. So it is very unlikely that Ruto will be different in the way that he exercised this enormous amount of concentrated power in the presidency. He'll still likely fall into the ethnic traps of how power is dispensed and how resources are distributed. So I think this national conversation doesn't seem to be the thing that keeps any politician awake at night. All this is about is personal aggrandizement and personal ambition, and the experiment and the project of state building takes a backseat every time. And even right now, there's nobody who's preaching national unity. There's nobody who's basically saying, hang on, guys, let's not have these divisive ethnic conversations around distribution of power. Let's organize ourselves around a set of national aspirations, a set of bold, ambitious goals to move our country to the next economic stage. Still all about power sharing, and when you look at the cleavages around that sharing, it's ethnic.
Exactly. So Alex, 1920, Kenya became a colony in 1920. We know this, the history, Mau, etc. 63, we got our independence. 1990, we passed multi-party, and Kenya was very galvanized around the idea of multi-partyism, liberalizing our politics. In 2002, we removed Moi from power. Were galvanized around removing the autocratic rule, fixing the economy. We had a glitch in 2007, 2010. The constitutional moment came, which was Kenya that fought for the second liberation. We passed our constitution. But when moving to 2022, moving forward, in your view, what should be the big ideas that we need to galvanize Kenyans around? And because in a sense that if what you're telling me is in the sense of this, Kenyans don't believe anything that the political actors are saying to them in terms of this. There's a breakdown of aspiration between what the political class is selling, either on one hand, bottom up and all these other things, on the other hand, the person Fukoni and bring all the ethnic beings together. It almost seems that the political class there's a disequilibrium in conversation between what they think Kenya, where it is, and where Kenyans are, and where Kenyans want to go with their country. So what should be the big ideas moving forward?
I think the big idea still ought to be the construct of a nation, nationhood. It is still this unfinished business. We have not become a nation in a sense of a dominant form of identity. We still see ourselves as, little enterprises of self-promotion, of self-advancement. Me, and then my family, and then my tribe. So there's still some level of comfort that we can't get from other levels of identity as a Kenyan. So the question then is, when I say I'm a Kenyan, what does that label buy me? Okay. When I say I'm this tribe, maybe somebody who is sitting somewhere who shares my last name might look favorably towards me and give me something. But if I just showed up somewhere and say, well, why are you here? I'm here because I'm a Kenyan and I love my country. People wondering, what the hell is this guy talking about? You know, what's there to love about this country? So until we find somebody who is charismatic enough to animate a sense of nationalism, a sense of patriotism, a sense of belonging to this land, and a sense of our forefathers fought for this space, got the colonies out, and won us the right to self-determination. And what are those obligations and rights of citizenship? It means that as a citizen, I have to defend my country. As a citizen, I've got to do right by my country. I've got to treat my brothers and sisters as fellow citizens. And my country owes me the benefits and the rights of citizenship, which is access to justice, access to work, access to decent housing, access to basic amenities like water, electricity, and all of that. And that government exists in the service of citizens. Now, that's the part that none of these people who've sat and walked down the streets of this country talking to voters as people who ran for the presidency have been unable to articulate. And as long as that's the case, then these whole shareholding aspirations in the real larger state of Kenya becomes a moot point because it becomes a moot point because nobody just believes that. So I believe that citizenship must be about things that we can touch, feel, and see. There has to be a dividend and the process of citizenship. That means that when I go to hospital and I find medicine, I feel like a citizen of this country. When I go to a government office, I receive service with respect and dignity, and I feel like I own this country as a citizen. I feel that I should pay my taxes because my taxes buys the government the ability to deliver services for me.
Right. But lastly, before you conclude, how does that process look like? On one hand, you have a political class that is very venal, very selfish, and just entertains themselves with self-aggrandizement. And on the other hand, you have a downtrodden, beaten mass of people who, in a sense, are becoming more and more pathetic. They have given up on any possible future of a Kenya that works. What does that process look like?
So that it just has to be. There has to be a moment, and Kibaki was that with Raila and the association around NAC presented that opportunity. Uhuru in 2002 presented a very different value proposition, which was continuity, status quo, and the Moi government. In 2013, Uhuru and Ruto ran on a platform of galvanizing the country, of healing, to see a Kikuyu and a Kalenjin on the same ticket after 2007 was a very, very beautiful sight to behold. And actually to believe that we could actually overcome the bestial and shameful acts of violence in the Rift Valley in 2007. And a lot of people believe that was our best chance to heal. And that having Raila would basically have deepened the divide. And then the youthful presentation of Uhuru and Ruto basically resonated with young people, and they said, this is the future. This is where we ought to go. And then you have the catastrophic performance of Jubilee, especially on the question of the economy and debt, fiscal responsibility, runaway corruption, and all of that. So I think Kenyans are frustrated. It's not for lack of belief and faith, but every time we've believed and trusted, we've been let down. We've been shortchanged. The protagonists and the devotees of these promoters of these dreams have just really forgotten as soon as we elevated them to power. Kibaki forgot Raila forgot. Kenyatta forgot the goodwill that sent him to power in 1964, 1963. So every time we've got these leaders who, suffer from just grotesque amnesia, that as soon as they overcome this hurdle, which is the election and they romp into State House, they basically just forget what is the reason they ran for. And if you remember, Obama kept saying when he was president that it is so easy for a leader to forget the reason they got there. And the reason they got there is to serve a cause that is bigger than them, that they were just the spearhead of the deep and yearning and aspirations of the citizens that they represent. And Kenyans are so they're so trusting. But now we're just getting very skeptical and jaded. And that's why you see the apathy in young people.
Right.
Hear how their parents talk about the glorious days of 2002, 2013, the National Accord moment of 2008. And we just see the country is littered with the skeletons of our hope, of our hopes and aspirations.
Right. My final question. I mean, because Kenya was designed as a colonial state, and I mean, there have been very many attempts, from Black rule in '63, multi-party, change the constitution. To your mind, do you think that this thing called Kenya as a colonial state can be reformed to work for the majority of Kenyans? And if so, how? And if not, what then do we do with ourselves?
So here is a very radical way to think about this. So my sense is that the founders of this country basically had only one mental model. And that model was the crown.
Yes.
The prestige, the seduction of power was modeled on the British Empire and the idea of a monarch and the crown. And that's how Kenyatta exercised power. That's how he strode this land. And then as soon as that happened and everybody else realized that that was the issue, we started another quest for liberation. And Odinga writes this heroic book of his, Not Yet to Uhuru. And that bug has never stopped biting us. That every time a president comes into power, when they're running for office, they run like you and I. They're ordinary citizens. They're frustrated with the hegemony and the overbearing power of Nairobi, and they want to liberate the country. As soon as they go in there, they're trapped in this colonial logic of exercising the state. And everybody else out is talking about liberation. We've been talking about we talked about the second liberation, the third liberation. Raila has been talking about this all the time. And now Raila still says that we have to finish the work of the liberation. Right. And I'm sure if he becomes president, we'll have people baying for his blood on the outside saying we want liberty. So the logic of the colonial state has been one of the most enduring encumbrances. It is the most pathetic yoke that is upon our shoulders to date. And how we shake this out has become something that is next to an impossible imagination. Right. So this colonial state and the exercise of power in the image of the crown is so alluring, and the way that our institutions are crafted is basically to feed that beast of that insatiable beast of colonial power reenactment. And I don't know who's going to break this down and institute a servant leadership and basically say that now this is power to the masses. Right. In the Bolshevik way, basically overturn this kind of Tsarist regime in terms of its logic. And it's the crown, is a monarch, So power to the people has never really materialized.
Thank you, Dr. Alex, for your time here at the Elephant. I'd like us to end with that very powerful note that we need a Bolshevik moment here in Kenya. Asante sana for your time and your thoughts here at the Elephant.
Thank you very much, Joe.